So once again, thank you all for joining the PPP Loan Forgiveness webinar. My name is Kay, and today we will be joined by Hiromi of Professional Tax Planning and Efrat from Corporate Payroll Services. This information presented today is provided for educational purposes and should not be considered legal advice. About Hiromi. Hiromi's parents were immigrants from Japan and Philippines. Her parents owned Hiromi's Oriental Restaurant, and she was born and raised in Chicago. In 2010, she began as an auditor for CPA firms, and in 2016 to the present, she shifted her specialty. She now does tax return preparation for small businesses, Intuit TurboTax on-demand CPA, internal auditor for a construction company, and freelances as a CPA consultant. Efrat has been with Corporate Payroll Services since 1999. She has a bachelor's in international business and has held a variety of roles in operations, management, and information technology. I will go ahead and shift over the control to Hiromi, and we will begin the presentation.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Hiromi. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited to show how I can explain the PPP forgiveness in a fun, interactive way. And I don't know if I should have my video or not, but I just wanted everyone to see me so that way this could be a little bit more personable. And yes, so I made these slides. I did the PowerPoint slides. I designed it. I read the guidance word for word. So if you want a good time bedtime story, go ahead and go to the Treasury Department website, and you may read the 26-page document and the PPP forgiveness application. So no problem. And so while I'm getting that control, and let's see how, sub-control, okay. All right, so it looks like I got the control, great. So the whole gist of this is that once you receive the PPP, the guidance is that once you receive the cash, for example, on May 4th, then 8 weeks after that, anything that is within this covered period, it would be forgiven. Otherwise, after week 8, the forgiveness clock ends, and then you would have to return the money on whatever is left over with 1% APR and a 2-year term loan, with the 6 months being deferred, right? You don't have to pay during the first 6 months minimum payments as a gesture, as is something that the government wants to give you time to recover from the pandemic and all of that. Now, the 2-year loan begins from day 1, the moment that you receive the cash, and then the actual payments begin after 6 months from that date. And then there was some guidance that made this a little bit more complicated than it appeared. So I want to share the slides that I made so that way this can be explained much better. Oh, I have no sound. Can people in the chat let me know if you can hear me or not? I have someone in the chat box saying that there's no sound.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right, I'm so sorry, Peggy, but it appears other people can hear me. See if maybe you're, let me see. Other people can hear me, so, okay, other people are giving advice. Okay, good, very good. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So there's 2 types of period that you can think about doing this, okay? There might be a little bit of a lag. Okay, and so the original period is called the covered period. When you receive the loan money, for example, on May 5th, 8 weeks after May 5th, that would be the end of the 8-week period. So 8 weeks later, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, June 30th would be the last date of the covered period. You have the option of taking an alternate payroll covered period, which means that the SBA received some inquiries and requests that instead of taking a period where the loan was received on that particular date, why don't you make the option that we take the first day of the first period after that money was received? So what do I mean by that? Instead of taking your first date of the covered period as May 5th, take it on May 11th. So that would be the first day of the first pay period after that money was received. So that way your covered period gets shifted, and 8 weeks later, July 6th would be the last day of your covered period. That way it's less confusing when you're paying for payroll, right? That's an option. And I just want to let everybody know that the PPP fund, it's called Paycheck Protection Program because it protects the paychecks of employees in your company, right? So 75% of the PPP funds needs to be used on payroll costs, and anything that is within that covered period, which means it's incurred during the covered period, during this 8-week period, and you pay the payroll within this covered period. And then we'll give you some steps on how you can show and how to do that. I hope that makes sense. I know it seems very complicated in the application, but just pick a covered period and then count 8 weeks after that. Okay, so here, what are the allowable expenses and how do you get 100% forgiveness? Because we like free money. Okay, allowable expenses, 75% or more of your PPP fund needs to be spent on payroll costs. And in the guidance, it said that gross wages is what counts as payroll. And that also includes bonuses, commissions, and raises, as long as the individual does not earn more than $100,000 for that year. Okay, so as long as that individual does not earn over $100,000 over the year, it counts as payroll. And I just want to let everyone know that when you were applying for the PPP application, the payroll tax that the employer pays and that doesn't show up in the pay stub of the employee, or how there's the employer portion of payroll taxes, that is not included in the payroll cost. So I would highly recommend that you use a calculator that your lender provides to you or anything like that, as I know that they're aware that that amount of cost is not counting your payroll. But in general, your gross wages, the bonuses, salary, commissions, and all that is included in the payroll costs. Okay. If you want to spend all 100% of the PPP fund on payroll, that's totally fine. It will be difficult for most businesses to do that. So what the SBA said is that for the remaining 25%, you can spend it on business utilities, business rent, and business mortgage. And we'll have a slide later on to define what those 3 items are, because it was quite vague when this first came out. So business utilities, business rent, mortgage interest, and 25% could cover those 3 items. And that's not mortgage principal, that is mortgage interest only. Okay, so if you do that, 75% plus the 25% of those 3 things, then 100% will be forgiven. Otherwise, if you can't spend the money on these items, then you have to return the money with a 2-year term loan with 1% interest rate. And at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. It's cheap money. It's good. If you get it forgiven, that's free money. That's really nice. Otherwise, pay it back with 1%. Just make sure you use it for your business. Don't go out buying a Rolls Royce. Don't go out buying a Rolodex or something. Make sure you use it for your business and be ethical about it, okay? All right. I hope that makes sense. And one caveat, if you look at the bottom, if you have an employee, especially if the employee is yourself, do not pay yourself over the this $15,000 amount. So if you do $100,000 divide by, I don't know, 52 weeks, then that's the amount. So as long as you don't pay yourself more than $15,385 during the 8 weeks, then you're okay. And another thing here is that if you're an owner / employee, so if you're the employer and employee at the same time, such as you're self-employed, then that $15,000 amount has to be across all of your businesses. So if you applied for the PPP for each of your businesses, you can't pay yourself $100,000 salary for each business. It has to be everything combined. You can only get one PPP salary up to $100,000 for yourself, okay? I hope you like that diagram. Okay. All right. If you receive the EIDL, and just a reminder, the EIDL, the money came from SBA, and PPP came from the lender. PPP money is using the cash that the bank has, and then they are supposed to get reimbursed by the SBA when you are approved for forgiveness. The EIDL, that cash is from SBA. So that's two sets of rules. And the PPP, the gatekeeper for the forgiveness is the lender versus the EIDL. The rules and everything is from the SBA. That's why there were two different applications. Just remember, the EIDL was that very, very quick 2-minute application that everybody did. And there were two parts to the EIDL. In the EIDL, there were two parts. The first part was the advance or the grants. So it's the advance, that's free money. There's nothing that you need to do to get forgiveness because it's already yours. It's pretty much a gift to you. It's not taxable or anything like that. It's a grant, you get to keep it. It's $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So a maximum of $10,000 gift, a $10,000 advance for you. And then you might have gotten an offer for an EIDL. By the way, that stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The EIDL, if you accept the loan with that, that's not forgivable at all, and you have to use that for working capital. Okay, so because the EIDL advanced portion of it was free and it's yours, and the SBA and IRS does not like double dipping, if you receive the EIDL advance, they will take it away. They will take a portion of your PPP forgiveness away from you. And again, I just want to say it's because they don't allow double dipping. If you feel that you're going to get double dipping, that's unlikely to be allowed and probably unethical in general. So what does this mean? That if you have PPP forgiveness and you were approved for $10,000 and you received $3,000 of EIDL advance, that means your forgiven total amount is $7,000 for the PPP, and you have to pay back the $3,000 with 1% APR with a 2-year term. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Oh, and in my firm, what we do is that we, in QuickBooks Online, that's what my firm uses, there were instructions by QuickBooks where you can put a class to a certain amount of money that gets in. You can put a class to the EIDL and then a class for the PPP. And you can, and when you do your financial statements for profit and loss, you can have columns across the board where you could show that EIDL and the PPP are in two different columns, and then you can allocate where all that money is going, okay? And a lot of people got both the EIDL and the PPP. Just make sure that you don't use the money for the same expenses. I highly recommend that the PPP funds are used for payroll for 8 weeks and the other allowable expenses, and the EIDL are used for the working capital. Okay. And a few of my clients actually refused to sign off on the closing documents for the EIDL because there were some clauses and some paragraphs in the closing documents saying that if the SBA so chooses, they might request an audit of your financial statements, and they might request a review either an audit or a review. Either way, they're both expensive, by an independent CPA to do an audit report or a review report. So some of my clients actually ended up not taking the EIDL for that reason. They're scared of an audit, or they're scared of a review because maybe they just don't like those things, right? It comes a lot of work if you need an audit. All right. So that was a lot. I know it's a lot of information. So if you have questions, please put that in the chat box, and we'll be able to go over those after this presentation. Okay. All right. So what if you don't give yourself a W-2? What if you're self-employed and you have a Schedule C, and or you're in a partnership, and so you give yourself a K-1, or you just don't pay yourself a W-2 wage or anything like that. And I just want to remind those who have an S corporation. I'm an S corporation. If you have an S corporation and you're an owner, there is a piece of the law in the IRS is that you must pay yourself a reasonable wage when you are working in an S corp. So even if you're an owner, you need to pay yourself a W-2 wage. Now, if you have a Schedule C, or you're self-employed, or you have a K-1, then you have to use 2019 net profit, okay? So Schedule C or a K-1, use the 2019 net profit from your 2019 tax return. We received some questions about, what if I didn't finish my 2019 tax return? What if I I don't want to turn in my 2019 tax return by July 15th? Well, you know, when you ask for the PPP forgiveness, there will be a piece on there where you certify that the tax return that you're turning in to get the PPP forgiveness is going to be the tax return that you file to the IRS. So that's up to you if you want to lie or not. But you know, you're certifying that you're not. So I would highly recommend that you turn in your 2019 tax return as soon as possible, as that year is already over. It's almost half of the year gone in 2020. So I highly recommend getting that tax return done and filed, and so you can turn in the final version to the PPP forgiveness application. Okay, so you get your net profit for a self-employed person, divide that by 52 weeks, and that is your weekly pay. Here's an example. Let's say your net profit was $78,000 per year. Divide that by 52 weeks, and that would mean that your pay to yourself is $1,500 per week. So I know I mentioned this, but I drew three buildings here to kind of represent the types of customers that we have. Schedule C, if you're self-employed and you have a Schedule C, then you have to use the Schedule C, line 31, to make this calculation. If you have a partnership or anything like that, you have a K-1, then you would divide the net profit from that, divide that by 52 weeks, and then that is what you would pay yourself on a weekly basis. Okay. Otherwise, if you have a corporation and you pay yourself a W-2 wage, then you don't need this calculation at all. You just use the payroll report from, and I know Corporate Payroll is developing that report, and I know other payroll companies are developing a payroll report that you can use to substantiate the PPP forgiveness. So I highly recommend going to your payroll provider for that information, the payroll report. We received a lot of questions about what are employees, who are my employees, basically. I just want to clarify that employees are the ones that you pay a W-2 wage, all right? So a W-2 wage, and that means by January 31st of the following year, you're releasing W-2s, and that's what they're turning in their 1040 for their tax return and all that. Those are your employees for the PPP forgiveness calculation. Then we had a follow-up question on, well, I don't pay myself a W-2 because I'm self-employed or I have a K-1. Am I an employee? Of course, yes, you are an employee because your self-employed income, you pay self-employment taxes on it. So essentially, self-employment tax is payroll tax. So that's Medicare, Social Security, and all of that. So of course, you count yourself as an employee. What does not count an employee are those who receive a 1099 from you, okay? If they're an independent contractor or they're a freelancer and you give them a 1099, they're not your employee. Why? It's because, again, you don't want to do a double dip. The SBA does not want to double dip. If you use PPP fund to pay the 1099 employee, they can turn around and ask for PPP funds for themselves. And so then that means they would get double the money. SBA does not like that. No double dipping is allowed. Okay, and then a warning. When you apply for the PPP application, you had a head count on the number of employees that you have, plus the estimated amount on salaries that you have per month that you pay, or the wages that you pay per month. Well, just to let you know, if you reduce that by 25% or more, that will proportionally reduce your forgiveness amount for the PPP. And I'm sure that's based off of the lender's calculations, the lender's calculator, and things like that. You might, the SBA did mention in their guidance that they will try to avoid double hitting you. So if you let go of employees or you had to furlough employees and things like that, and then you reduced salaries, you don't want to get hit twice. So there were a few calculations in the guidance to avoid double hit. But in regardless, just try to get your head count to be the same during the covered period. Does it have, let's say, for example, you let go or you furloughed an employee during the covered period because the PPP fund either didn't come in fast enough or anything like that. And then throughout the covered period, you need that employee back so that way your forgiveness amount doesn't get reduced. You can rehire that employee back, or you can rehire another person to replace that employee. I do want to mention that if you let go of someone and you offer them a letter to return to work, sorry, I let you go because I didn't have any money, but now I want to bring you back. If that employee decides to decline the offer, then you are not hit with the penalty. You're not hit with a reduction in your forgiveness as long as you keep a good amount of documentation. Make sure that you have a written email based on that employee's denial and things like that. Maybe they want to deny because they want to receive unemployment and things like that. But again, that is something that is not your fault. If you had to let go of an employee because they're doing unethical things and stuff like that, you had to fire them and all that, you don't get penalized for that either, as long as you have very good documentation. Okay. All right. So what's the definition of rent and what are utilities? It was very vague before the application had come out. So now we had some definitions out there and some clarifications that we still need. But this is what I heard. Essentially, A utility is anything that is electricity, gas, and water, transportation, cell phone, and internet, and that also include landlines as well. Rent is anything that is either real property or or buildings or anything like that. So equipment lease sounds okay, car lease is okay, as long as you have the agreements in place before February 15th, 2020. All right. Now, is business use of home rental rental space of your apartment or of your mansion or anything like the business use of that portion of that building or anything like that, does that count as mortgage, a portion of the mortgage interest or the electricity part of that home? It was not clear by SBA and it was not clear by the Treasury Department if that's going to be allowed. But the whole gist of it is that the recommendation is that if the IRS allows it, then it's very most likely going to be allowed for the PPP forgiveness as well. All right. All right. And I put a little guy on the left side here, and that's the guidance. It's 26 pages. You may read that you may peruse through it, you may skim through it. It's what I've read and all that. I just visualize it, make it look very pretty. But yes, you can click on that link there once you have access to this and take a read at it. And I'll also let you know how to get to that directly from the Treasury website. All right. This was not part of the guidance, but this was something that the SBA had recommended and some lenders had recommended to make auditors' lives easier and to make the PPP forgiveness application easier. So this is not really written anywhere, but this is something that a lot of CPAs are discussing, and lenders talk about this as well. So here are 3 steps to document how your PPP fund is being spent. Step number 1, deposit the PPP funds in its own bank account. All right. Now, when you do that, buy paper checks. I know it sounds already convoluted, I get it, but this is something that the SBA recommended, and I'm just relaying the information to you. Please don't get mad at me. So step 1, put the PPP funds in the bank, in its own bank account, and then buy paper checks, okay? And on the left side, I have a little mini diagram to kind of visualize this. Step number 2, take one of those checks and reimburse yourself or whatever you pay your personal account or anything like that. Use a paper check or a transfer that has a memo on it and say payroll from PPP funds. Okay, and so I put a little arrow here with an envelope. You can put the check in there, mail it to yourself or something. I don't know. But anyway, you use a paper check and put on there payroll from PPP funds. And then you have check images, and it's just super easy to audit. And then you could provide the bank statement with that. Step number 3, write a check and in the memo put business utilities from PPP funds and then business rent from PPP funds, or put business interest from PPP funds, okay, from that bank account to wherever it needs to go, right? So this way, when this bank account has all the information that you need to provide support, there's the bank statement, and then all the transaction that's coming out of it, all the paper checks, it's nice, it's super clean. Paper check images is on there, and then you can attach all your agreements and documents on how you're going to do that with a nice Excel spreadsheet and Excel spreadsheet to really clearly document this stuff. Okay. All right. Now, what is really, really required though? The previous slide was about a recommendation, right? But what is truly required? And looking at the application and a few lenders' websites and things like that, I've discovered 4 items that is truly required. I guess for some of you who only want to take 75% of the forgiveness on payroll, then you can take a look at this, but I highly recommend still doing the previous slide. But here are the 4 items that I found. Number one is your tax return. For those who are self-employed, then provide your Schedule C, line 31, or your K1, the 1065, the 1120, or whatever you need to provide for your personal or your business tax return. That will be proof for payroll in a lot of self-employed people, like in your case and things like that. Otherwise, you provide the 941, right? If the 941 does not cover the full covered period, then you would provide a payroll report with that, a supplemental report. Okay. Number two is your payroll evidence, okay? How are you gonna provide payroll evidence? And like I said from the previous slide, it's the bank statement, it's the check images, or it's the 941 or the supplemental payroll report. Number three is the non-payroll evidence. So for mortgage interest, you're gonna need to get the amortization schedule, which amortization schedule should line up all the principal payments, all the interest payments that's on there. And so you would provide the amortization schedule. Keep a receipt, keep your receipts, keep your check images, keep your bank statement, the invoices that you're paying for either rent, for your utilities, I don't know, Georgia Power, AT&T, things like that, and anything that can substantiate all these allowable expenses. Easy, right? Easy peasy? Okay. Well, and then the last and final thing that people are going to ask for is the lender needs to make a decision within 60 days at the end. So at the end of week 8, of course, during week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you don't have all these documents available yet because you're still using the money. So 60 days after week 8, the lender has 60 days to make a decision if you are allowed to have your PPP fund forgiven, and you need to turn in the application to the lender, and they are the ones who are basically auditing you, basically asking that information from you, and that you need to verify from your lender on what do they require in order to get this PPP forgiveness. And I do admit, for those who have big banks that provided the money to you, it will be very difficult to get in touch with your lender. For those who have smaller lenders, smaller banks, it might be slightly easier. Otherwise, some banks are more forward with reaching out to clients than others, and some banks will have, like Pinnacle. Pinnacle was doing their own webinars and things like that. They have their own website and they are answering questions on their own webinars and things like that. But otherwise, the gatekeeper is your lender. You have to talk to your lender when it comes to the PPP money. They're the gatekeeper, and they're the ones who approved for the PPP forgiveness. They were the ones who approved you to receive the PPP money, and so they will be the ones to want to approve your forgiveness. Okay. All right. And then some clients came up to me and said, all right, you're a business owner, I get it, and you're all very quick. And some of you already spent the money, and there were no documentation that came along with it, and now you're at a shock and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that I had to do all of these things. I just want to let you know that this may be a problem because there's a certification along with the PPP application when you first initially asked for the PPP, that you knew what you were signing up for and you knew what the rules were. And so there could come along jail time and criminal charges that comes with it, fines of up to $250,000. And so this is quite serious and quite painful. Right. There were some news articles of those who received more than $2 million in PPP funds, how now they're getting audited. And I guess there was a hip hop artist who is in court because he used that money to, I guess, get a Rolodex and some other jewelry and buy a fancy car or something. So please don't do that. And please make sure that you contact and help, ask for help, because I'm sure everyone here is ethical and moral and that you want to get this fixed. So, so what do you do? What do you do when it comes to that if you've already spent the money? So here I am, the CPA doctor, and I have some solutions for you. The easiest solution is that if you have some cash lying around or in a different bank account, please put that money back. If you have PPP funds of $10,000 and you spent $3,000 on I don't know what, but please put that $3,000 back in that bank account. And I want you to put the full $10,000 into a separate bank account, and then follow steps 1, 2, 3 on putting in a separate bank account and writing yourself checks and things like that. So that's the easiest solution. And then there comes along with the solution number 2. What if you don't have the extra cash to put the money back because the money's gone and you're low on cash flow and things like that? The second solution I would say is to document, okay? Let's trace back to how that money was spent, and let's document and get a red pen and print out the bank statements and circle and tick mark wherever we need a tick mark with invoices and agreements and things like that to substantiate where that money went. Solution number 3 is to wait for your lender. Ask your lender what is truly required. And like I said from the previous slides, that I had 4 items that they're going to be asking for. And then we can help you on figuring out what you can provide to your lender at the minimum, so that way you don't get in trouble for the money that's already spent. So if you have evidence that you spent the money correctly, then you should be okay, right? Solution number 4, I'm going to put like a little shameless plug here, and it's called CPA. You know, contact your CPA and or your accountant, and go into your accounting system. And I know everybody here is very successful, right? You have an accounting system, and you have QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop or anything like that, and you put a class to the amount of money that you've received, and you're allocating it among all the different allowable expenses that you are supposed to, right? So your CPA or your accountant should be able to do that and allocate the funds. QuickBooks Online had a really nice guidance over the weekend, Memorial Weekend, where they kind of explained how to do all of those things. Okay, so calm down. You know, everything is going to be okay. And I feel that those 4 solutions are the best so far. You know, I was an auditor once before in my life. And, you know, there's always a way to answer these types of questions. There's always a way to revert and sift through the documents to make a story. You know, and as long as you're moral, not lying or anything, there's always a way to go through your documents and trace it all to make it work, right? So some references that can help you. The SBA disaster program is, if you need any more information on that, actually the EIDL has been around for many, many years. And this is something that is used for hurricanes, earthquakes, and things like that. It just so happens it got popular during the COVID-19, as now the whole entire nation is using EIDL. Okay. And if you're looking for the phone number for the SBA, you can go to www.sba.gov/local/assistance, and you can find the phone number and the address. So you can find whoever is close to you, so you could see who you can ask questions to directly to the SBA. Now the SBA will have more information on the EIDL, and then they'll have the guidance on the PPP, but the SBA will point to the lender and tell you to talk to your lender when it comes to PPP forgiveness, because they're allowing the lender to be the gatekeepers for that, right? Okay. Hold on, there were some notations here. I had to clear the screen. Right. Okay. Oh. Okay. And then the third reference here is www.treasury.gov. If you want to see the word-for-word guidance, go ahead to the treasury.gov website. Anything that ends with .gov is official. So go to www.treasury.gov, and on the top, there's a red banner. You may click on that, and then they have this very nicely organized FAQs and all the information that you need with the dates and all that. You may take a look at that for the actual guidance, all that. Okay, and then the SBA forgiveness application that's coming from the Treasury website, you may click on that. For those people who don't have PPP yet, but I assume everybody here does, I guess there's still money. The deadline to apply is June 30th. Tell your friends that they may still apply if they so wish. And the forgiveness application is in that link. So you can go ahead and click on that if you want to see what it looks like. So PPP aside, just think of it as something that this is to open our minds and open our eyes to how do we avoid any like ruffling through documents and things like that. So number one, always keep your records in order. Keep your receipts, bank statements, and a good accounting system that is very organized as a business should, right? So that's your records and all that. Your accountant or your admin, I guess your admin should be the one who helps you put it into all your different clouds. And if you pay the $199 per month for the Google Drive or the box or the OneBox or OneDrive and things like that, put it all into one spot or into one drawer and make sure that it's nicely organized, all your bank statements and all that. So that way, when you have good records, you have good financial statements. And the point of the financial statements is not only to get approved for loan assistance or to get an investor to contribute into your business, you know, it also helps you as a business owner to analyze what expenses are things that you either need to let go or probably try to analyze it. Maybe you're purchasing software that has duplicate applications and things like that. It helps you see the big picture of your business as a CEO, right, or a CFO, okay? And then after that, once you have your financials in order, at that time, then that would be the best to start strategizing on your taxes, right? The one that doesn't bring you to jail, right? We don't want to do anything illegal. There are loopholes, legitimate loopholes that you can get around. We all understand that a piece of the net profit goes to taxes. So what do the wealthy do to kind of strategize to lower your taxes? You know, that's why there's such thing as the S Corp and the LLC and things like that. So that's like a whole conversation of a lifetime. And so that is something I just want to put out there, PPP aside. But if you had all of this in order to begin with, the PPP forgiveness would have been easy. All right. And that's what my firm does, right? My firm, Professional Tax Planning. I'm an S Corp. I am the only W-2 employee, and then I get help from other CPAs that I pay 1099s to, and I help with the tax planning and then tax savings. If you have any questions, I'm here. That's why I'm doing this webinar from the goodness of my heart, and to save you time on what you need to focus on. And if you ever feel that you have an overload of information, then I'll point you to the right direction and what you really need to know. That's why I mentioned that, like, if you're an S Corp, then this is what you need to know. If you're a self-employed, then of course you need your Schedule C, line 31. Different little nuances like that, the little things that people don't really talk about when they're running a business. Okay, with that, I want to give this back to the Corporate Payroll Services. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Hiromi. A lot of great information for all of us to digest through. And I see a lot of good questions, so I won't take up too much of our time on my side. I just want to point out we are working on a PPP Loan Forgiveness Supplemental Report, which will be equivalent to the Schedule A worksheet that's on the loan application. So we're looking to provide you with that information that you can attach with your when you submit your loan application. Another thing I want to point out is bank accounts. She mentioned she went into detail as far as how to handle the PPP bank account. So I highly recommend that you follow her guidance. But I do also know that some companies have already been making changes to the bank accounts on payroll. So just keep in mind right now, if your payroll fees are coming out of your PPP bank account, that's not considered an eligible fee or an eligible payroll cost that you can expense and ask for loan forgiveness. So I encourage you to make that change as soon as possible. And then also payroll taxes, just keep in mind payroll tax debit does include employee and employer's portion. And on the employer's portion, the federal unemployment tax and the employer's FICA, Social Security, and Medicare are not considered eligible deductions. So just keep that in mind also. So maybe just reevaluate how you're currently handling your bank accounts. But we can accommodate for up to 3 different bank accounts that you can use. So you can have one bank account for your payroll fees, one bank account for payroll tax debit, and then a third bank account for the net pay, which can be paper checks issued or direct deposit. All right, thank you so much. I'll turn it over to Kate to go through our questions.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having a difficulty unmuting. So we have about 15 minutes for questions. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question. So the first question is for Hiromi. What if we still don't have enough work to pay our employees 40 hours? We are paying them 20 hours a week, and they are also receiving a 20-hour balance from unemployment. Is this okay?
Well, unemployment is being governed by Department of Labor, right? So depending on your state, you need to follow the requirements for that Department of Labor. So I know in New York, you have to work less than 4 days per week and earn less than somewhere around $500. In Georgia Department of Labor, where I'm located at, it's you have to be earning less than $300 per week. So SBA and the Department of Labor are not speaking to each other, and they're not sharing documentation. So that's really up to the employee on if they want to avoid getting in trouble or anything like that, right? So they did certify that they're not working or getting paid a certain amount based on the requirements of the DOL. Now, when it comes to you don't have enough work to keep the employees working for 40 hours, well, the Paycheck Protection Program is to protect the employee to stay on your payroll, to keep them employed, right? So I heard of some clients, even if there aren't any work, and because they have the PPP funds, they're paying the employees anyway out of their goodwill, in hopes that after the pandemic is over, like as we know, restaurants are closed, but employers don't want to lose their very good employees, so they continue to pay these employees out of the goodwills of their heart. Plus they'll get forgiveness on the PPP fund anyway. They'll pay them even if they're not working, just to keep these employees on their payroll. You know, it's really about a relationship thing.
Thank you. So this question is, what if our payroll is monthly? So money is received in mid-May, but payroll period is May 1st to the 31st. And our payroll is run on June 1st.
Got it. Okay, got it. And I should have mentioned this during the slides. So for example, with mine, right, I pay myself twice, but I do know that when I distribute the payroll on May 29th, this Friday, let's say I received the money on Monday, which was, I already forgot the date, May 25th. Let's say I received the money on May 25th, and I need to distribute payroll on May 29th. So that would mean that only half of my payroll that I'm going to run is going to be within the covered period. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a check and get the payroll amount, divide that by 2, and basically I'm reimbursing myself for the part that is incurred during that covered period. And then after that, I have 3 full payroll periods after that, and then I don't have to worry about dividing it or anything like that. But in the guidance, it did say that if a portion of the covered, if the portion of the expense is within the covered period, then it's okay to pay that portion out of the PPP fund, as long as you have that clearly documented.
So just to make sure that I understood that answer, so say, for example, this person received their loan on the 15th, but their payroll is from the 1st to the 31st. Only partial payment from the 15th to the 31st will be the only thing that's covered, correct?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see here. If we don't use all the funds, can you be forgiven for the portion you used and pay the remaining back and not
Yes.
have to pay the whole amount?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The portion that you get forgiven, you get to keep that, and then the portion that you don't, you pay that back with 1% with 2-year term.
Do I tell the lender I need alternative payroll period?
I don't remember on the application, in the SBA PPP application, if there was a checkbox in there or anything, but I do know that in the application, that's kind of where you state what period you're using.
Okay, let's see. Can we use 100% sum of both the PPP and the EIDL for payroll?
You can use the EIDL after the 8-week period.
But the EIDL won't be forgiven, correct? That's something that needs to be paid back?
There's 2 pieces of the EIDL, right? There's the EIDL advance, which is a gift, so you don't pay that back at all. That's going to reduce your PPP forgiveness regardless. That's the rule. The EIDL, the loan part of it is not forgiven. You have to pay that money back. That one is a 3.75% interest rate, I think, and that one's a 30-year loan term. And there are some rules in the closing documents that you're going to have to follow. But as long as that one, that's not forgiven. You have to pay that money back. Okay.
If you have a 2-week payroll, can you pay on the last day of the pay period in order to get a 5th payroll in 8 weeks?
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just skipping past any questions that have been repeated. Can you use the money for hazardous pay by just adding additional money on employees' payroll check?
Yes, I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry. Yes, you may do that, and that was specifically addressed in the FAQs in the PPP forgiveness guidance. Yes, you may add hazard pay as long as the employee is not getting paid over $100,000 for that year.
Do we have to apply in 2 different applications if you want the PPP and the EIDL?
Yes, it was 2 applications. SBA, I don't think they reopened their EIDL application for everyone. They opened it if you have a farm, right? If you're in the agricultural industry, they reopened it for that industry. Otherwise, they've closed it. They're out of money. But yes, it was 2 different applications. The EIDL advanced and with the loan, that is in the SBA.gov website. And then the PPP application is through the banks.
Okay. So I know you mentioned earlier that 1099 would not count, but I still have a question about contractors that maybe there's a loophole here. Can you bring on temporary contractors for 8 weeks to help bring your business back up to speed due to the impact?
If you're paying them W-2 wages, meaning what I mean by W-2 wages is that you are the one paying for their unemployment compensation, right? If you have an agreement with that employee that you're going to give them a W-2 and you're going to pay the Department of Labor unemployment payroll tax on their wages and half of their payroll taxes, of course you can give them a W-2, right? It's the only reason why people hire 1099 employees is because employers want to save money on the payroll taxes. It's just cheaper to hire 1099. You don't have to do any income withholdings. You don't have to pay any payroll taxes, and the employees is on their own pretty much. And the 1099 employees, a lot of the time they want to get paid 1099 so they can take all the tax deductions, and then they can apply for their own PPP. Now, if you want to pay them a W-2 wage because you want to use the PPP fund, yes, you're more than welcome to do that. Just let the employee know that he or she cannot add that W-2 wage in their Schedule C because it doesn't belong there. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. So I'm an S Corp. Which document should I use for the payroll forgiveness? A 941 or a K1?
The 941. I'm an S Corp also. With an S Corp, it's tricky only because you have to pay yourself a wage. And that one it was just very clear that if you're an S Corp, then you have to pay yourself a wage and you have to give yourself a W-2. The K1 wouldn't count. And if you were accidentally accepted to get PPP without paying yourself a W-2 wage, that was a mistake on the lender's part, because the lender shouldn't have given you that PPP fund if you're not paying yourself a wage if you have an S Corp.
Thank you. So I'm not sure how to ask this question, so hopefully you'll get this one. So what about employees that are holding out on returning to work due to the fact that unemployment has an additional $600 pay, which is more than what they get at their job? All
right. We get these questions. We get this question quite often. This is more like a relationship building, right? The unemployment benefit is not going to be there forever, right? And as far as I know, the unemployment benefit will run out by end of January 31st. And the employee wouldn't want to burn a bridge with you because they want to keep this additional $600 per week, because at the end of the day, this is a relationship of a lifetime, right? Or you think. And so that's number one. And this is more than just about money. And number two, it's against the rules with the DOL to decline work, right? In the DOL, that you're supposed to be searching for work every week. And if you are offered employment, you're supposed to accept that. They would get in trouble if they don't accept the employment.
Thank you. Let's see. When I applied, I put a number as all employees, full-time and part-time. Since there is no clarification that part-time employees should count as 0.5 total, how do I go about that since my original PPP application counted part-time as an employee?
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, it's based by head count. So a part-time employee is not considered half a person. They're considered one head count. So part-time and full-time is considered, two people. The thing that you might struggle with is if you change their salary, right? So it's not just the head count that can reduce your forgiven amount, but also the total amount of wages that you pay throughout the 8-week period. So you got to make sure that neither of that will get reduced.
Is business insurance a forgivable expense?
Business insurance was not. Oh, you know what? Okay, that was not listed in the utilities. So all of the words that I had on the PowerPoint slide was what was written on the guidance. So there were no mention of insurance.
So that would be something maybe to ask their lender, or?
You can ask the lender.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So I have 2 car notes and both cars are used for work. Would the PPP or EIDL cover this?
So that one, it's not clear. I don't know if that is considered your personal car or a business car. If it's a business car, such as the title of the car has your business name and you have business insurance with that car, then yes, that would be counted as rent, right? Or your property, right? That one I would feel more comfortable with. Now, if it's your personal car and you are deducting the mileage on it, that one's a little bit more iffy because that wasn't clear on the guidance and that was not mentioned at all. So I would ask the lender on that one, but I really don't know when it comes to that one. I'm sorry.
So we have a couple past utility bills. Will these be part of the forgiveness?
If it's incurred during the covered period and it's paid during the covered period, that's why there's the recommendation that you write yourself checks, right? Yes, that will be covered. That'll be forgiven.
Okay, so I just want to give an example. Since I'm assuming past due, say for example they received the money in May and they have a past due bill from April. Is that something they can pay and that would be covered?
No, because that utility was not during the covered period.
Okay.
It has to be incurred during the covered period.
Is our entire rent forgiving, including real estate and CAM charges?
Hold on, repeat that question.
Is our entire paid rent forgiven, including real estate and CAM charges?
If it's for business, if it's your home, the business portion, right? I would consider that rent to be forgiven. If it's business related, I would consider that. But if it's part of your home, then no.
Okay. Let's see. The majority of our employees make over 100,000. Can I just limit the amount applied to the PPP to the allowable amount of 15,385?
Yep.
I am a sole proprietor and have 8 employees applied for both. Okay, I'm a sole proprietor and I have 8 employees. I applied for both EIDL, and I received 8,000. I have been approved for the PPPs for 70,000. I applied for both, and I did not know the situation. I did not know how the situation would be. Will I need to pay the PPP? Okay, hold on. I'm trying to read this. It's a long question. Do I need to start over? Or you got the gist of that first part.
I'm looking for it in the chat, but if it was a private question, I might not find it. Yeah. Oh, here is.
Yes, from Robert.
I've been approved for PPP 70,800.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you received $8,000. It's not clear if the $8,000 is in advance or if that is the loan. If it's an advance, it will reduce your forgiveness. So if you get 100% forgiveness, so all $70,800 was approved to be forgiven, reduce $8,000. Now, with that, you have to pay back that $8,000 of the PPP because it won't be forgiven. But it's 1%. If you don't want to pay the 1%, then you can pay the $8,000 right away.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question. So we're going to go with this one here. The last question. I have one full-time employee who was in my head count, and he can't come back full-time yet because of childcare still being closed. If he works at least 1 day a week, can we still count him in the head count for loan forgiveness? I realize it will make the money amount a stretch. We may bring on a new employee to make up the difference.
That sounds like a great idea. And I do want to remind you that although we didn't cover it during this PowerPoint slide, you can get a credit, a tax credit. And this is a bonus for everybody who stayed until now. Because the employee's child's school was closed, you can ask for an FFCRA, that stands for Family First Coronavirus Response Act. Tax credit on the fact that the child's school was closed, so you can get a $200 per day tax credit. You can continue to pay that employee even though the employee is not working. You'll get a tax credit on that. If you do payroll through corporate payroll, I'm sure there's they can help you out with the IRS form called The number is 7200, but I would highly recommend taking a look at FFCRA. I think that was a part of the webinar we did a few weeks ago. You can get tax credit for that. So that's a bonus information for you on that. But yes, I do think it is a good idea to hire another employee to increase the number of the total dollar wages to get PPP forgiveness.
Thank you. So if you guys have any more questions in regards to the forgiveness, I do have Hiromi's information up here. You can create, schedule an appointment via her Calendly and go ahead and ask any questions. If you have any payroll related questions, you can reach out to Corporate Payroll Services directly. Thank you so much, Hiromi, for hosting this with us today. It was very informative, and I hope it was very helpful for all of our customers as well. And thank you again, Effort, for your help. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.